Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we have James Perkins. James, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
I'm so happy to have you here. I feel like you've been working on some really cool stuff, and I'm very excited to dig into it. But before I do that, let's talk about you. So for folks who aren't familiar with you and your work, do you want to give us a bit of a background on yourself?
Yeah, so my name is James. I have been around for a long time now. This is year 15. I've done everything you could probably think of. I started in the automotive industry. I went to gambling, did the lottery, did fintech for a while. And then most people that know me, at least in the last few years, is when I worked at Clerk, which is obviously authentication. And now I co-founded a company called Unkey, which works in a different authentication space, but in the same place.
Right. And this is, I think, a very interesting space to be in because
Mhm.
APIs are easier than ever to start these days. Like you can pull, whatever your favorite framework is or no framework at all, you can write a handler function and you've got an API and it's deployed in a few seconds. So what with it being as easy as it's ever been to get an API up on the web, what is it that gets hard? Or I guess what are the sneaky things about building APIs that you've noticed that made it worth creating Unkey?
Yeah, so I think you start with this vision of an API, whatever it may be. Um, and then you start to realize that, okay, well, I have an API now. Well, how do I know who or what should be accessing this API? So that's your problem number one is like authentication in that space. Like, how do I know this person should be allowed to hit this API? Because if it's something with, data behind a database or whatever, you don't want anybody just being able to access that info. So problem number one is like, that's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Then as you kind of build that out and you're like, okay, now I have an API key and I can give that to you or to whoever. And great, that's perfect. Okay. Now my problem is that well, Jason's in America, but another user is all the way in the UK. Okay, now it's super slow because I'm only
Mm,
in one place, right? So like I'm using US East 1 as an example, but it could be anywhere. That's where I have my like API and that's where I'm checking all my keys and now it's super slow. So now it's like, okay, now I have to figure out how do I move this everywhere in the world so that anybody in the world can have the same experience as somebody who lives in, right next to a data center. So you've kind of figured that out for a while, and that's like a whole resource that could take an entire team to get right.
mm-hmm.
Um, so you figure that out, and you're like, great, now everybody's globally distributed. It's super fast. Oh no, now somebody is doing the same thing, but now they're abusing the API, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now you have to figure out rate limiting. Like, how does that work? Do I need consistent rate limiting? Do I need fast rate limiting? Do I care if a few slip through the cracks? Or do I want it to be really, really strict where it adds a bit of latency, but it's really strict so that, once you hit that rate limit, you're done. Like, there's no way
Right.
that you could possibly do that, right? So then you have that problem. And then you move into another problem. Like, well, maybe I need a key that only lasts a week. And then, so now I have to do something like that. Um, so then, okay, now I have this API key that now expires in 7 days. Like, how do you make sure that that's actually true and the resource is available, right? And then the list goes on. Okay, maybe you're in the AI space and you need a key that only lasts for 100 tries because
Mm,
you're using like, I want to generate a cool picture and you pay me $10 and you can do it 10 times, right? Like,
mm-hmm.
how do you do that? So like all of that stuff starts to like trickle into growth. So like the API at the beginning, yeah, that was really easy. Then you give them API keys. That part seems fairly simple. And then you start compounding on issues that come up. And usually what happens is these issues come up when you least expect them, right? So you build out whatever it is, and then, oh gosh, like someone is abusing our API. Like, okay, now we got to figure out how to do rate limiting really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of implement it. Um, and then you might not do it right. It might not be scalable. Like all these things start to crop up. And then once you've dealt with just the basics of like protecting your API and dealing with that kind of stuff, then you got to think about like, how can I track who's using the API and what are they doing with the API? Should I be upselling this person that's using my API because maybe they're doing 10 times as many transactions as another person, right? Like then you start to think about like those parts of your API. And that's like another thing you have to implement, right? Like how do I track who's using it, who's verifying keys, who's not verifying keys? All those things start to
Right.
come up. And then by the time you get to the end, you've spent years building out this API and then it's just a maintenance nightmare. You've got pieces everywhere, probably half the team's left, and then it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So getting started with APIs today, super really, really easy to get. But once you start protecting those APIs and thinking about ownership and keys and revoking them and updating them and all those things, you start to scale out how long that project could take.
Yeah, I think what I've noticed in my career, at least, is that when I start building something, you know, my instinct is to say, well, I'm smart, I can build this, and then I'll build it in house. It'll be way cheaper, and it'll do all these things. And then I very quickly find myself with a bunch of bespoke systems that all need attention and care. And the amount of time that I have to build competitive features is dwindling. And all I'm doing is spending a bunch of time working on something that is like table stakes. Like if the auth doesn't work, my product is broken and I can't do anything, right? So I'm dedicating these hours to these fires around operational boilerplate, basically. And that has led to me having a pretty, I've been pretty vocal about like, I just don't think it's worth it to build undifferentiated software. Like to me, that is what I would call undifferentiated labor. It is you spending time on something that has no value, right? Because if you like, unless you're a huge company, the economics just don't work out. Like having somebody dedicated full time to maintaining your like auth boilerplate, it's just so expensive. Salaries are not cheap. And
exactly.
It's almost certainly going to be cheaper at the outset to pay this problem away. Like you solve this problem with money, not with time, because especially when you're small, time is so expensive because you have to build something that makes you stand out, right? So that's why I was kind of excited when I heard what you were doing here, because I have built a lot of APIs, but they never get me on the toy stage because I don't want my job to be maintaining the productization of an API. So I just make it fun. And if it's too expensive to make it fun, I shut it down. Right.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. Right. It's like a good comment in here. It's a nice exercise at the expense of your company to learn that stuff. And I do think like learning this stuff is valuable.
Absolutely.
Doing it all the time probably isn't what you want to be doing as a dev anyways. Like I know what the trap that I've fallen into in many of my engineering roles is I join the company, I get really excited about solving a problem, I build something custom to solve that problem, and then I never get to build anything custom again because now my job is maintaining the custom thing I built.
I've done that too. I've done that numerous times. I built OCR software for car registrations in California. So essentially what it did was you could send all the paperwork to California and they would just get a giant scanner. They'd throw it all in there and this bespoke software would then scan it all and basically make them into deals. And then they would verify those and then send out the plates. That was the whole thing.
Oh, cool.
And I spent like a year building it. They approved it. It was like a really big contract. They approved it. They loved it. And then my entire career until I left was literally being like on call, being like, hi, yeah, okay, bug, got it, I'll fix it, okay, now try. And that was my entire career after that. And that was the last bespoke thing I ever built. After that, I was like, nope, I'm part of a team now. Teamwork, let's do team stuff.
Yes.
And yeah, like if you look in today's world, like authentication is a hot space right now in general. And if you look at front-end auth, which is where most people think of authentication, like you look at Auth0, what they were doing 5 years ago, and then like what Clerk is doing today, they're entirely, on the same idea scale, but they're doing completely different things.
Right.
Clerk is definitely all about like, I want you to go as fast as possible today, and then tomorrow, we want to give you all these features that are going to allow you to scale, et cetera, et cetera. And with the Auth0, it's like you get the whole package, right? It's enterprise, it's really expensive. And then like almost every single time, whenever you talk to anybody that uses a third-party auth problem, they're always the same question is like, oh, well, the cost is going to be so high by the time you get to 1 million users or 100 users or 1,000 users or 5,000 users, whatever the number is, right? But if you're in a revenue-driven model, it's going to be pennies on the dollar, right?
Yeah.
But you've saved yourself probably 3 to 6 months of implementation and then years of maintenance.
Yeah.
You've got a whole team that does all the maintaining and updating and features, and you don't have to worry about that.
Well, that's kind of what I'm always like, somebody will start doing the math and like, this would cost me $70,000 a year. I'm like, how much does the engineer cost that would maintain it in-house?
One engineer
probably
is
a lot more than, market rates, somewhere between like $120,000 and $200,000 a year to have an engineer. So like, where is the time going, right?
Yep.
And that to me is like, if you can afford to put the engineer on it, you can definitely afford to pay for the service. It just, and I have this, like I very much understand it. I have this relationship with money where paying for something I can do myself gives me this like physical sensation of, but the other physical sensation I get is depositing checks and not maintaining that software.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a twofold
and that
thing,
is
right?
a much better, like any pride I get from building it myself is I can massage that pride with the extra money.
Exactly. And I think that's the key element, right? Like, yeah, you could roll this all yourself. We're not saying that you can't. Like, go ahead, do it. Whether it's auth, whether it's API auth, rate limiting, all that stuff. Like, you go do it yourself, and that's fine. And if that's what your business model allows, then great. But I would rather spend my time building feature sets, new features, or like improving some other part of the product where I can capture more enterprise users or business users or whoever I am, B2C, B2B. I'd rather capture those people and be like, oh, please give me your $40,000 to $100,000 a year contract. And I don't have to, my API auth this month cost us $1,000. Okay,
Yeah.
I've got like 10 of these contracts now, and now it's like, 1% of my overall costs. Like, who cares?
Yes.
I never have to worry about it.
And like, I think when that scale becomes a problem is far beyond what most companies are dealing with. Like, sure, the Amazons and the IBMs and the Googles of the world, they've got scale that we don't really fathom, and the economics are different for them. But like, for the average SaaS product, like what we're really looking for is like 1,000 paid users. And that usually, like, there's so much money in those scales of like, 1,000 to 1 million users. Like, we're not doing the millions of throughput and the petabytes of transfer and all that stuff that usually makes these things economically infeasible, where it's like suddenly, yeah, you do want to have your own data center, but almost certainly you don't until you're $1 trillion company.
Yep. Yeah. And if you look in any of those sort of builders that are out there today that are building products, like, I mean, if we use Theo as an example with like upload thing, right? Like, great products, genius idea of like simplifying uploads for files and images, right? But like, if you look at the product itself, they're using Clerk, so they got rid of auth. They're using Clerk for organizations. That's another piece of their B2B gone. So that Mark and Theo and Julius could all focus on, hey, we want to build this really good product, and now we've got rid of like this entire layer of stuff we don't need.
Exactly.
And if there's a problem, I reach out to Clerk and say, yo, this is broken. Like, what am I supposed to do here? And then, whoever it is goes and fixes a problem for them. They release it, and they're like, great, thanks, and we move on. And I think if you can reduce the amount of time it takes to get to market, you don't have to be the first person to market. You don't have to be the third person to market. But if you can reduce the amount of time and you offer something that seems shinier or better than somebody else, that's how you build success. And that's proven here just with Unkey. some of the backstory behind it was Andreas, the co-founder, has done many projects. People probably know him in the open source space. He's probably in the chat right now, doing work and listening. But his whole thing was that he built an API and then built out these features, didn't do it very well. Then had a second product, did the same thing, built it out, was a little bit more scalable, but still had a lot of boilerplate and like stuff that you probably didn't need. And then like after the third time, he was like, okay, if I'm building this every time, surely, and you're copying and pasting it, surely at some point there must be other people out in the space doing it. And that's kind of how we got started, was just like, yeah, this is a thing and this is a problem, just like front-end auth was 5 to 8 years ago, where like Auth0 was the option or you did it yourself, and that was it. And now you look in the space, there's Auth0, there's Clerk, there's Stitch, there's FrontEgg, there's Hanko, there's, like a million different options out there now, and each one of them has their own special set of features.
I love, like, and what's amazing about this space is that you just listed off all those companies and you could have made up at least one of them and I would have no idea. And I definitely believed every word you just said. Right?
Exactly. And that's the thing, right? And that's the thing. Like, if, the big players in the space and everybody else is kind of just like in there doing their own thing, cutting their own little slice of the market. It's a crazy time from 15 years ago where, I was building Java software and there wasn't any options for anything and everything was in-house built and it was hard and it sucked. And then like watching the years go by and every year something new and in the space or something pushed it out further, whether it was, Vercel when, they were Ziet and they were like, hey, look at this cool thing that we built. And now you can just deploy with one click. And Netlify, the same idea, right? Where it's just like, wow, just drag and drop or click your GitHub and now you can deploy every time. That didn't exist when I was around. We were manually copying files and then hoping that it didn't break.
I remember I had my CyberDuck window open and we just dragged the folder in and hoped.
Yep. I remember when Docker was just a new thing that had just like taken over that space. And we had like a guy who was super great. I still keep in touch with him. And he was like, we should do Docker, and that's what we should do because it will allow us to roll back really quickly. So like if it breaks, we can just get the old image, put it up, and it will just immediately be available again. We can make like a little... so he built his own in-house like deployment system, similar to like GitHub Actions.
Yeah.
Where you could like click deploy, and it would like push the Docker file out, and then you could click rollback, and it would... And that was the most amazing thing we'd ever seen in like 5 years that we were working in this space.
What I think is fascinating is, like you just said that, and it sounded so similar to other companies where I worked, where they had the same thing. They saw this thing, it would make their lives easier. They didn't have any way to do it easily, so they built something in-house. And it was CI/CD. It was some like deployment tool. It was some auth thing. And it was so cool when they did it. And it slowly became an albatross around the company's neck because they didn't know how to get off of it. And the person who worked there, who built it, was promoted on something else. They had left that team. They'd left the company. And the people who inherited it, like, mostly understood it, but not entirely. So the thing went into, like, permanent sunset mode. Was like, no new features. We're just going to keep it alive. Right?
Yep. So many times I saw that.
And so I think, but this is what's interesting to me, right? Because you just listed off all of these companies that have entered the space for auth specifically. And this is after, I think, the pretty clear appearance that Auth0 was the only thing that we needed in the space. It was over. Yep. Auth was solved. Auth0 does it. If you don't need what Auth0 does, you just get your own. And if you're bigger than Auth0, you get Okta, right?
Yep.
And like the appearance of these companies to me shows the strength of having access to these tools that let you only focus on differentiation. And what, like, this is why I get excited about this space, is that if I know that for me to stand up an API that does something novel takes a few minutes to spin up on Vercel, Netlify, Fly.io, whatever it is I want to use, and then securing that API so that I could sell access to it in a way that I trust with rate limiting and individual keys and all that stuff only takes me a few minutes if I can sign up for a service to do that. And getting the auth into the web app, like the dashboard part, only takes a few minutes using a service. Then all I'm ever spending my time on really is marketing and features. Like I'm telling people it exists and I'm building things for them to use. And that becomes such a good iterative cycle that allows me to have an idea, build the idea, try the idea, see if people pay for it, get the feedback, change, ship, get feedback. And we're just in a space now where this is possible at a speed that has never been possible before, because all of these services allow us to just offload so much of the boilerplate that used to be an absolute showstopper for somebody who was a solo dev. Like, can you imagine 10 years ago trying to build an API as a service and like get even close to a funded company's level of features and quality? Like there was no chance. And today,
I mean, today you could do it in, like I think AI is the perfect example of this space right now. Like the bubble is weird right now, and there's a lot of AI companies out there. But if you look at the space, like tomorrow, someone's going to launch another AI product, right? Like I think today we saw, that there's a new AI buddy for your phone. Like there's things out here, right? And just the open AI space, having that ability to like, okay, cool, I can integrate AI in like minutes. And now I have this API that I can talk to. 2, I can use something like Clerk. Now I have auth, and I have bot protection, and I have disposable email protection. I have all these things that I don't have to worry about, and no one can abuse my products. And 3, all I do is ship the feature, whatever the feature is, whether it's making cool generative AI art, or I'm, using ChatGPT-4 to produce, outlines for blog posts or essays or whatever. Those things, you can just ship the features, improve the features, tweak, get the feedback, do all that. And people are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month just doing that. Because like all they have to focus on is, I had this cool idea for AI. 10 years ago, if we did that, 10 years ago, if OpenAI was a thing 10 years ago, but the rest of the space wasn't here, so we didn't have Vercel, we didn't have an auth provider, we didn't have Planet Scale for databases or Terso or whoever, right? If all that didn't exist, that idea would never even get off the ground. You'd be like, I have a cool idea, and cool, I'm just going to never think about that again, and I guess I'll go back to trying to figure out how to make Node work 10 years ago, like, or Java, map over correct things in Java. Like, it was wild back then. It was just, you had to be willing to dedicate your entire life to, if you have an idea, there was no iterative, like, let me release an alpha and see what happens. It was like, I'm all in, and this product has to do well, and if it doesn't, then I've just wasted 2 years of my life or whatever. Now it's like, I've got 2 weeks because I've taken off from my regular day job. Let me build a side project and see what happens, right?
I actually think this is like the thing that's really fascinating to me is we're seeing a playing field that is more accessible than any I've ever seen, where if you have any amount of programming skill, you have access to launch a product on your own. Like, you don't have to be a full stack dev to build a full stack product anymore. And to me, that is such a game changer, because you've always only been limited by your ideas because you didn't have to build a web app to start a business. And so, I'm not saying that like this is the only way, but for somebody whose skill set is building for the web, you no longer need to become a database admin or become a cryptography expert or become a backend, DevOps expert. You can leverage these companies that'll do it for you. And you can go out, you can have an idea, you can build it, like you said, in a weekend or a couple weeks. You can ship it. You can see if anybody wants to pay for it. And if it doesn't work, who cares? You're on the free tiers. Just shut it down and move on, right? You can just iterate and iterate and iterate. It's never been possible like this. And so I think that web dev is both like easier and harder today than it's ever been. Easier because of the access to these tools, harder because it's just complex. There's a lot to know, having access to these tools does not replace knowledge of how they fit together, right? So it's not like
Right.
we're taking anything away from the level of complexity of building something like this. We're just taking away from the level of effort required to get it plugged together once you understand how it all fits. And that to me is the exciting part. Is you can say, well, I want an API that somebody pays for that is protected by an API key that allows them to do this thing, as you said, 10 times, and then they can pay me for another raft of API calls. I have no idea how I would build that. I know how I'd build that. I wouldn't.
Right.
I would talk myself out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's what you see, right? It's just like, oh yeah, I want to build this thing. Like AI, when it really kicked off, everyone was like, yeah, I want to build this thing. And like, we've seen some crazy stuff come out of the space. And then there's probably been, another 10 or 15,000 people that have like, I want to build this, but I don't know how to do this part of this whole project. And like, there's nothing out here in the space. Like, what do I do? And now, yeah, I think it's easier than ever to figure out how to plug the pieces together. You have the idea, you kind of play around with all these different tools, you build the project. Yeah, if it works out, great. Cool, revenue or whatever. Like you've unlocked whatever it might be. If it doesn't work out, learning experience. Now you know about this product and how it works. You know about, how they integrate with other parts of your project. How can I make it faster? What could I do better next time? And then you start to think about more about architecture and building and how all these things link together. And that allows you as a developer to grow in different ways than before, where, yeah, it was literally like you were a back-end developer, you're a front-end developer, and there was never any, that was it. That was back 15 years ago, that was it. You were either one or the other. You were never a full stack. You could never be in that space. And then full stack engineer kind of came along and you could do both and you were skilled on both sides. But now it's like, if you're a front end dev, you're just that's it. Like if you're a web dev, you're just a dev. Like you could do any part of this stack without any worries today. Like Next.js is a great example of building a full stack app where you don't even need to know about a lot of stuff. If you don't worry about servers and you're not worried about that, having Next.js and the serverless space and being like, I need an API. Okay, I just make a folder or I make a route and I call it whatever I need it to be, and it's done. Okay, next. Now I just need the logic that fits in there. Like we never had that. Like that was wild to me. I remember when that came out, and I was like, oh my gosh.
Well, I was talking about this yesterday. I was thinking about the fact that Sunil Pai was talking about serverless and trying to figure out how WebSockets fit into a serverless space, and it occurred to me, I don't think are we thinking about servers and serverless unless we're the ones building the frameworks anymore? Like, you don't choose server or serverless with Next or Nuxt or Svelte or any of them. You just deploy. And depending on where you deploy, under the hood, they'll choose if it's going to be servers or serverless or static or whatever. But it's an implementation deal. It's fully abstracted away now. I don't even wonder. Like, I'm like, oh, I have a remix site. I'm going to deploy it to Render, or I'll deploy it to Vercel, which is serverless, or I'll deploy it to Fly, which is a Docker image, or I'll deploy it to what. It doesn't matter. Who cares? It's a complete implementation detail now. And what I really like about that is that it's yet another level of complexity that only matters when you have edge cases. And otherwise, it's just become a part of, when I hit a key on my keyboard and a letter shows up on the screen, I'm not thinking about all the things that happen and make that happen. I just know if I push a key, the letter shows up. And that's sort of what I'm feeling with deployment these days is like, if I've got a site, I deploy it to Git, and whatever service I hooked it up to picks it up and takes it to the internet. I don't have to think about any of that shit anymore.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Unless you're actually building out a product or a framework or a language or whatever, you don't have to worry about what's happening behind the scenes, or is this a server, serverless? Should it be this? Should it be that? It's just like, cool. I click this button, and then whatever product I've chosen as my deployment area is done. Great, awesome. Thanks, everyone. Like, check out my cool website that's super fast for some, like, and you don't even have to worry about why is it so fast. Like, all that stuff gets taken care of, right? Like CDNs and all the other stuff that you had to worry about. All that's gone away now.
Right.
And I think, like, in the API space, that's kind of where we're moving to now, which is like going from 5 years ago, where you're right, Auth0 was 5 to 8 years ago. Auth0, that was all you needed. You just, if you didn't want to build it in-house, you sign up for Auth0, you put in their web thing, it redirected you to their site, you click sign in, and that was it, right? That was it. And similarly now, I think the explosion in the API space is really happening. Whether it's API management or API documentation or SDK generation, like all these things are starting to appear because people are figuring that, the front end part of web dev is always super complex. And now that's kind of being served by a bunch of different companies, whether it's in the Auth database, wherever, frameworks, etc. Now I think we're starting to see that, like, hey, now back-end developers actually need some help. So let's like start building in that space and making it more easy to get these things going. And like you'll see startups less reliant on things like CI/CD, or even the way that like middleware, like you used to have middleware engineers. I don't even know a company that has one anymore, but you used to have these middleware engineers that would sort of be reliant on things like gateways and that kind of stuff, right? Where that was their job, was like make sure that this gateway doesn't go down, and like make sure it does all the routes. I don't think they exist anymore. They might.
They tricked us. If we were middleware, because like I was middleware, I drifted into building like the back ends of. I build a lot of stuff in the back ends of Gatsby when I was there, and then moving on to the Next and the Nuxt and the they've all got their middleware tiers baked in now. The API layer is right there. You're writing data adapter plugins. You're doing your API calls in the system, and those are just sort of like we're converging on patterns where all the frameworks look so similar these days. Like they've all picked up some form of like hooks pattern. They've all picked up some form of signals at this point. The good ideas of Vue got adopted by React. The good ideas of React got adopted by everybody. Actually, it just seems like we're all kind of borrowing ideas at this point, and we're converging on some patterns that make it possible for what you're talking about with APIs and with moving into the backend space. I think a lot of that is because we can confidently say that we've arrived at standards. Like we're using JOTs when we do authentication through APIs. We're dealing with with specific flavors of like OAuth 2 is what everybody landed on. That's what we use. We're not arguing about that anymore. And those sorts of decisions are driven by our frameworks. They're driven by the way that we fit everything together. And oh my goodness, we have been going for 30 minutes. James, normally we hit a natural stopping point where it's like, clearly it's time to look at code, but I got to cut us off. I could go all day. Are you ready? Can I bring us over and let's do some code?
Yeah. All right. Let's do some code. Let's talk about Unkey. Let's show it off and we can kind of go through it all.
All right, here we go. So before we start, I'm going to do a quick shout out. We've got live captioning happening today. That is being provided by Lee at Whitecoat Captioning. Thank you, Lee. And we have that made possible through the support of our sponsors, Netlify and Vetsu Code, both kicking in to make the show more accessible to more people, which I very much appreciate. We are talking about Unkey today, so let me throw that up on a link there for everybody. And James is the person giving us the lesson, and that's all I know. James, if I want to start learning, what should I do first?
Yeah, so the first thing you need to do when you want to use Unkey, first thing you should do is sign up for an account. If you click the Start for Free or the dashboard button, it should take you to the sign in. You can choose any auth provider that we offer, or you can sign up with your email. And then once you get signed in, you'll get dropped into a space where we essentially onboard you through the products.
Oh, nice.
Oh, your screen has gone black. That's interesting.
Something.
Is that you or us? Oh, there you go.
It was just thinking.
Oh, it's in dark mode, apparently. Okay, so so you can this is your workspace. This is essentially a way for you to group APIs together. So just think of it as like a giant space where you can put all your different APIs, production, development, whatever you want. Okay. When you click Create Workspace, we'll create the workspace for you, and now you get to create your first API, so you can call it whatever you want. It's not shown
What
to
should
the
our
user, so it
API
says-
be today? What should we be delivering?
I don't. Something spooky because it's
Oh,
Halloween.
it is spoopy season. Let's call it spoopy stuff.
Perfect. And then what we do now is we essentially onboard you through how Unkey works. So the first thing is we have this thing called a root key. Now, the root key is essentially a way for you to create other keys, access resources, update keys. They are essentially a version of, like a secret key or something in the space where, like, Stripe, for example, has Stripe secrets. Clerk has Clerk secret key. Essentially, this is the keys to the kingdom.
So this is my admin user. If I have this, I'm allowed to do anything.
Yep. Essentially, this allows you to create new keys for users, all that kind of stuff. So go ahead and create your root key, and we'll only show this to you once. So once you click create, we'll copy it somewhere off screen for now.
Okay.
Just wherever you want.
Yeah, let me find a spot I can toss it over here.
Yep. Perfect.
Okay, got it.
Cool. And then the second code block here is actually a way to create a key that could be used for your API. So if you actually copy this curl request, and we'll kind of show you how it works. And then if we just drop that in a terminal of choice.
Should I?
We can delete the root key or whatever later, so I'm not worried about that. And you can do it in VS Code if you'd like, if that's
let me just do one of these and one of these.
Cool. And okay, so we would provide you with, this is the key on the left. So that's the actual key that you would give to your end user. And the one on the right is a key ID that you can use to identify the key in the user, either in the API itself or in our UI. So now you've created this key. If you copy this key as well, we'll keep hold of this key because we'll use it in a second. And we'll just paste it off screen wherever you want and then go back to the UI. And then we can move on to the next step, which is essentially the most important step of this entire thing. So you click I have created a key. So this is the next curl request. This is essentially our verify endpoint. This allows you to verify the key that you just created to see if it's allowed to access a resource of your choice. So if you copy and paste that in and drop the API key that you had.
Okay, so let's do that.
Yep. And then put the key that we created that's actually just above, so you didn't even need to really copy it. And just drop that key in there. Yep. Paste that in and hit enter. Okay, so you get this response back right now. It says valid true, which essentially from us is saying, hey, this guy is good. Like, let him access whatever API that you want or whatever resources. Okay, so let's flip back to full screen and in our UI, and we'll just do a few more things. Click let's go. Okay, so you get dropped in. Here is essentially your Unkey workspace. In here, you can do a bunch of different things, but let's talk about if you click on your API there, so the spoopy stuff, inside of this is a usage tracker here. So in dark mode, it's not as good, but in light mode, it is a bit better. But
you're gonna make me do.
You can actually change it if you just go to settings. You don't even need to change system settings. If you go to settings in our UI, we'll let you change it so you can keep dark mode on forever. If you go to settings on the left-hand side, and then I think it's under user, and scroll all the way down. Yeah, there you go. Just change it to light mode. All right. Our dark mode is still kind of a work in progress. Okay, that's better. So as you can see here, you've got this big black bar. Essentially, that says this is a successful verification. If it was rate limited, it would be a different color. If usage succeeded, it'd be a different color as well.
Okay.
So this is an overall arcing look of what your API looks like. So imagine if you had 1 million requests here, like you'd be able to see like what days were the most popular, how many verifications were successful or unsuccessful, all those kinds of things. We'll also tell you how many keys are here, how many active keys, etc. So if you click on keys tab here, you can now see that this is just the key that we just created as part of the onboarding flow. As you can see, it's very limited. It doesn't really have a lot of info here. And if you click the 3 dots on the right-hand side and click details, here you can actually see a breakdown of this key. the request, how the request was sent, what region of the world that you sent the request from, was it valid, invalid, all those things. You basically get like an up-to-date verification. You can kind of dig about and see, if someone was reporting like, hey, I tried to use your API and my key said this, you could go and look at that key ID and kind of, change those settings.
Yeah.
And which makes it really good for like business purposes and all that kind of stuff. You can kind of dig in and say like, oh, that's weird. Why did this request come from a different IP than it's ever come from before, or a different region? And you kind of dig in.
Okay.
And then before we start coding, there's just a few more things in the UI that I think are pretty cool and neat. If you click settings here, you can actually update the key itself. So you can enable remaining uses and say like, this can be used 100 times. And then, if you click that, type a number in there and then hit save. And that should save. And then now you should get back a different response. It may still be cached right now, maybe. Let's check. If you go to the overview in the UI one more time, you'll actually see how many usage. Yeah, so I think we've probably got a caching issue that I'll have to talk to Andreas about there. But we can create a key in a second, and I'll show you how you do it through the UI.
Okay.
I mean, through the API. But essentially in here, you can change all the settings. You could put rate limiting on, you could turn it off, all those kinds of things. And yeah, you could make it expire. You could add some metadata here. You could give it a name so you could know which key this is for.
Oh, and so metadata, like we could even do something like roles or whatever, and then give it like the I don't know, post create or something. And then
so right now we don't have authorization, like roles and stuff like that, but that is the feature that comes in November.
Okay.
Or we're going to start the work in, there you go. Andreas says, caching might take up to 60 seconds to reflect metadata updates right now, working on making that faster. I knew he'd be around. Thanks, bud. But yeah, like if you do it in the API, it's better. But yeah, so essentially here you could put in metadata there, right? You could put your roles or whatever you needed. Maybe it's a Stripe ID, all those kinds of things that you might need, that you need access to on the key. And then the final thing will show off in the UI, and then we'll start doing some stuff in code. If you go back to the API section, click on the API again. We probably could have done that easier. And click Create Key in the top right-hand corner. You can actually create your own key here. Give it a prefix, for example. So that will be like the first letters in the beginning. So you could put prod or dev or spoopy, whatever you want in there, right? You don't need that underscore. We'll put it in for you.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. And then like you could add like the owner. So you could put like Jason or, whatever you needed in here. And then in the advanced section, you can actually put in. Go ahead.
Sorry, something was clicking in my head. So if I'm creating this, so if I say I've built an app, I'm using Clerk for my users to log into my web app, then I'd be able to put the Clerk ID here as the owner, so that I know that this API key is associated with this Clerk user, so that I can then easily like, oh, this user deleted their account, go delete every API key associated with this.
Exactly.
Okay, I get it.
Exactly.
Very cool.
And vice versa, you could also do like the like, oh, this user is like really aggressively using the API. Let's go and link that to my database or Clerk or whoever and say, okay, let me send them an email and figure out like, what are they doing and how can we help them? Those kinds of things. But in here, so in here you could add like rate limiting, you could add the limited usage, the metadata again, or, add the expiration date on this, and this will get added to the key immediately, and then you'll be able to use it from there.
Okay. So let's add a number of uses. Let's give it 5 uses so that we can actually break it.
Cool. And then when you click Create Key, it should give you the key here, and it will give you the verify, so you can just copy that and just hit the API. And that should give you immediately. You see now we have this remaining 4 on here, and if you continue to do that, remaining 3, remaining 2, remaining 1, and then remaining 0, and then the next time you hit the API, you see valid is now false, And then you've got this remaining a 0 and a code here, key usage exceeded. And you can actually go and look up what that key looks like. Like that error message, you can go look in the docs. But if you go and look at the key now, so if you click keys and go to that one and click the details on the right-hand side, and now if we look at that, you'll see now we've seen how many uses they've tried, which was 6. You can see that 5 of them were successful. 1 was usage exceeded. And then you've got all the details below. So now you've got this like whole picture of how a user may actually be using your product.
And this is going to show, so this is for a single API key. And then when I come back out, we've got all of our calls.
Yep. But we don't have the usage exceeded on there right now. But you'll see that in the future. We just changed a bunch of our metadata that we're using to drive these analytics. So right now you only see 1. But in the same idea, in the same vein, that will show as like, oh, that's usage exceeded, that's rate limited, so you can get an overall picture of the API.
I mean, this is super handy because, you know, it's if the thing you're doing right out of the gate is just trying to give people API access to something, then this has a lot of like. This is everything that I would need aside from payment.
Yes.
And that is really nice because it just lets me try. Like, all right, I got some data. I think people would pay to use it. Let me put this up for sale. I've prototyped this in a day and I can just ask for the first, you know, Stripe payment. And if somebody's willing to pay it, I can see if they use it. Is anybody using this API, right? How are they using it? What calls are they making? That kind of stuff is really, really powerful for quickly validating something. And boy, do I find it tedious to implement myself.
Yeah, and exactly, right? Like, so in a similar vein, as every classic company is built upon itself. So like Unkey is built across Unkey. Like we use Unkey under the hood to power Unkey, right? And so we had the similar idea, which was like, yeah, we need these analytics, right? We need this details to be able to figure out like who's using it and what's being used and all that kind of stuff. And so we basically built the analytics as like, these are all the things we need. Let's make it available to everybody. Like we shouldn't hide this behind our like whatever. We should give it to everybody, and then they can decide from the get-go if they want this or not, or if they're going to even use this, because maybe you want to pipe it somewhere else and you use each return response to do your own analytics, but out of the gate, we can give it to you so you don't have to worry about it. And just as a side note, Unkey is completely open source. Every piece of Unkey is open source, so you can go and look at how we built Unkey and how we're driving analytics and everything like that. So if you actually go to GitHub in the top, right before the dashboard, that should bring you here. This is actually the code. You can see what we're up to, what we're doing, how we built it. Every piece of Unkey is here. Nothing is hidden, nothing is private. So you can go and look at like how we implemented Auth, how we implemented this. So you can really get an understanding of like our SDKs or the packages, everything like that. But it's 100% open source, so you can go and play around with it. And if you haven't already, everyone should just star it so that we can finally get to 1,000. We're almost there. But yeah, we're super happy that everything about Unkey is open source. Allowing you to self-host as well, right? So that's the key element there is if you use Unkey today and then like you decide you no longer want Unkey as a cloud platform because maybe you don't want to pay the services, maybe you already have ways to stand up Unkey, you can 100% do that. You just deploy it on your own. You won't get all the like you'd have to handle all of the like distribution and caching and everything else, but you can essentially do this all yourself and do it that way if you prefer. As we found, bigger companies want to sometimes self-host their own stuff behind racks and stuff and don't care about latency and all that kind of stuff. So it's 100% there. You can go and look at it. You can contribute if you'd like. We're always happy to take on whatever you have. But let's move on. Let's actually get some coding. Let's do some code. That would be fun, right?
Let's do it.
That's what people are here for. Let's make a NextJS app because those are nice and easy.
Is it create next or create Next.js?
It's npm create next app.
Like that?
that sounds right.
That's
Actually, I think
fine.
it's all. No, I think it's one. It's npm. Oh, maybe it is that. I type it so often that
Yeah.
like. Let's make it. Yeah, that's it. I believe that's it. Yes.
Oh, you know what I need to do before we do this is I have to move up a layer, or this is going to get really weird.
There we
Okay.
go.
Npm
Yeah,
create.
definitely don't make it inside learn with JSON.dev because that would just be confusing.
And we'll call
Yeah, cool.
this Unkey API auth. Yes.
I was
Yes.
gonna say that's entirely up to you. You yes, whatever you want.
Would you like to use this source directory? Do you have? I haven't used the app directory, so you would have to teach me if we go that way.
It's gonna be it's gonna be app directory anyway by default, and that's fine. It's basically the same thing. You'll be okay.
Okay. All right.
Or if you want to do pages, it's fine. Like if you prefer, just click no, and we can do pages. If you want more of like a less pressure on you, I'm happy to.
I mean, honestly, it's been so long since I built a Next site that I think no matter what, you're going to have to remind me how all this works. So,
hey,
YOLO, cool. Let's ship it. I'm not customizing anything. Okay, so we're installing dependencies. Then I'm going to move into here, and I'm going to open this up. And then we'll shut that one down. And now we've got a little next app.
Yeah, so the first thing that we will probably want to do is head over to the docs because we can kind of drive through docs as well as teaching, right? So it's just Unkey. Yep, perfect. The first things that you probably want to do is install our TypeScript package that we have. So that'll allow you to just do, API stuff without having to use REST. It's probably not in the quick start because that's just the UI, but it is in if you go in the sidebar on the top left there, there we go. If you go to libraries in the top, tabs, keep going up.
Oh, here.
To the right. There we go. Yep. And then you want that one. So yeah, it's just npm install @unkey/API.
Okay.
Perfect. And so this basically gives you access to the SDK. So with the SDK, you get things like automatic retries and things like that. So if for some reason, the API does, reject it, it will try 5 times, all those kinds of things, making it really easy to essentially try building out your API. So from there, we need to do 2 things. So with an API, and you're selling it, you need 2 things, right? One is to create a key for a user. Okay. And then the second one is, of course, you want to verify that against whatever resource they want to use, right? So those are the 2 things that we really have to worry about in this demo. So what we can do first is we can probably just create in the app directory, if we just create a folder there and we just call it API just to keep it simple. And then we create one called create, another folder called create, sorry. And then just route.ts. Yep.
Okay.
And then we create another one called verify, for example, and then with route.ts. Great. So those will be our API points that we're going to use for our users. Essentially, in a create, we'll just put in some fake data. Maybe we'll just create like a form in the page, and we'll just, put something in there. And then the verify will have a button that says verify. So the easiest thing to do here is probably work backwards. Let's do the API work first, and then we'll do the form afterwards, just so it's easier to kind of handle. So the first thing you want to do is go to create a route there. Okay. And then we have to remember how to do route handling in Next.js because it's all new. It should just be a async function where we tell it post or get. It doesn't really matter.
Okay, and let's see. Get is probably easier because we can hit it. You want to post? Let's post.
Well, it's up to you. I was going to say with a post request, we're probably going to pass something in, right? Like a user ID or just some
true
data
yeah, that's a good call.
That exists, right? Okay, so we've got that. So we need to import the Unkey method that we need. So for this, if you go back to the docs, because I like to reference our docs at the same time, just so people can drive at the same time. So we need to do this part here at the beginning, which is the unkey root key stuff here.
Okay.
So just import unkey. Yep. And then essentially all we need to do is create a const that's called unkey that instantiates unkey, and we pass in a root key.
You doing this inside or outside?
Yeah, we can do it inside the post request. That's fine. And then perfect.
Okay. And then the root key is going to be, is Next still using process.env?
Yep. Process.env.
And then this will be unkey root key.
Perfect.
Okay. So then we need to make that. So down here.
In the, yep.
It's just a, is it .env or does it need a suffix?
Yep. Yeah, no suffix needed.
Okay. Unkey root key is going to equal, and then I've got this. We already showed everybody, so I'll just roll this after the stream.
It's fine. Yeah.
And
then we're probably going to have to tell it because it's TypeScript. It's going to think that it could be undefined. Yep. It thinks it's going to be undefined because the process could be undefined. So we can just tell it never be undefined. We promise. Okay, so now we have unkey here instantiated. Essentially, now you can make calls to unkey however you want. So if you do something like unkey dot, you'll have a bunch of options there. So we have APIs, keys, and then retry. We're going to be using keys here because we have keys.create. And essentially, with the create, there is a required field, which is the API ID. And then the rest are all optional fields that you can put in there.
Okay. So and my API ID is I'm gonna intuit that it is this one here.
That is indeed your API ID.
All right. I'm going to
now you can put that as a env if you want, or you could just paste it right in there.
I feel like we're gonna use it enough that we might as well abstract it out. So then we've got our process.env. What did I just call this?
Key? API ID, I hope, is what you called it.
Did I?
We're both guessing. It's fine.
I prefixed it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, there we go.
Okay.
And then just tell it that it's not going to be undefined. Cool.
All right, and then I'm going to assume.
So there's a question in the chat right now that says that's the API ID for the root key. The root key actually belongs to the workspace, not the actual API. So you can use one root key for all your different API IDs. So if you had 10 different APIs, you could use that single root key. Obviously, it's probably easier if you have separate root keys for different things, but essentially you can make as many root keys as you need. But yeah, it's actually the workspace that owns it. Right. So at this point, this key is actually basically going to be created when we call this endpoint. We could probably just, return new response and then just return, JSON.stringify and then the key. Perfect. One thing we probably want to do is if we're making this as simple as this, let's just make it a GET request for our first attempt. And then afterwards we can make it into a post maybe. Okay. Great. So now we have this key, we can actually, npm run dev, and then we should just be able to call that endpoint. And it should just be the localhost 3000/API/create. And that should give you a result. And there's a new key and there's a key ID. So that's how quick and easy it is to create your keys. And then at that point, you're ready to actually just use this key wherever you want. Mm-hmm. And we can kind of flesh this out in a second, but let's do the inverse, right? Let's now verify this key. Okay. The way that Unkey works, just as we're kind of talking through this, we can make this a GET request as well. And then we'll make it a post request and actually pass the key in, but just for simplicity. While Jason's typing furiously to get through all this. The way that Unkey works is, every key is essentially pre-warmed and cached as soon as you create it. So your first request is as fast as your second request versus in other spaces, for example, actually, I'm going to show you a different method that doesn't require that in a second.
It doesn't require this?
Yeah, you don't need, you can delete that out. We actually have a method
Get it out
that
of
works
here.
without that. Yeah. So everything's pre-warmed and cached, right? So everything's going to be super fast. As soon as you use this key for the first time, it will be as fast as the second time. So if you actually import, there's a method here called verify key. And this doesn't actually require you to use your root key. Because we are verifying the key, we don't require the root key as part of the verification step. So
nice.
here,
Okay.
you can just do something like verify key and then pass in the key. And it's a key. I think it's yeah, and that should be it. And that'll verify
And
key.
that returns.
And then that returns a result or an error, so you can just use that as your const.
Okay.
And the result will be if it's successful, and an error will actually be if the API actually errored. So the result will have either result.valid, it'll either be true or false.
Okay.
So that should make it nice and easy. And then we should just be able to use that result.valid. I think it's, yeah. I am.
Oh, that's Boolean, right? So we probably want to do something like if.
Yep, exactly. You got it. Yeah, if
Result.valid,
result is valid,
then we can do
return,
something like return new response unauthorized. If I can spell unauthorized, and then we want a status. What is it? 401.
Yeah.
Okay, and otherwise,
also, just one thing is that this verify key is also asynchronous, so you need to await it. Otherwise, yeah. There we go. All right. Perfect.
Okay.
And then, yeah, so now if we actually make this just a GET request to this verify endpoint, now we should see something else. And there you go.
That works, and then I can let's give it a broken API key.
Junk one.
Get out of here!
Unauthorized. And yeah, there
Look
you
at us go.
So you
Look
can
at
see
us,
how
Chad.
fast the response. I know, aren't we so good? It's like we've been doing it or something. It's like we know what we're doing. But you can see how fast the response is, right? Like you're not having to wait hundreds of milliseconds. It's like tens milliseconds, if that.
Right.
Average response time is under 30 milliseconds, which is essential for this part, right? It's critical path in your decision-making tree. And if it's slow, then what's the point?
Well,
You might as well
right.
just
I mean,
tear us
like,
out and do it yourself, right?
yeah, I think this is kind of one of the things that gets really hard is as you build out a system and the system has more complexity, each of those steps in the chain needs a little bit of time, and those start compounding, and this is how you end up with like a bank website that takes 14 seconds to load or something, is because it's just like step, wait, step, wait, step, wait, and all we see is a spinner. But if you look at the network tab, it's like this API and then this API and then this API, and then you finally get to see whatever page you were trying to go to. So yeah, like maybe doesn't seem like that big of a deal in isolation if your call takes 300 milliseconds, but if this is one of 15, 300 milliseconds is, what is that? 4.5 seconds of waiting for the API keys or all that chain of 15 calls to resolve.
Yep, and if we're the bottleneck, we failed, essentially. Like, the idea here is your decision-making, whether you got to go to a database or you got to go to another service or whatever it might be, our part in this process should be the shortest amount of time.
Yes.
And we should be able to give you a response in under 30 milliseconds, whether it's let them get to this resource or don't let them get to this resource. And that's, by the way, that's really tough. Shout out to Andreas. He's probably still in the chat somewhere. Like he gets distribution like no one I've ever met before, and his work on making it incredibly fast right from the get-go was incredible, and he did a lot of work behind the scenes to make it as fast as possible. I can take no credit for that part. That's all him. I can take credit for the login screen when you sign up for an account. I can't take any credit for anything else. So yeah, let's sort of make this a bit more, like you can now do a bit more with the key creation, right? Like let's add remaining or an expiration or whatever you want to add to your key creation here, because the response from us changes based upon what you kind of got here. So if you put 10 in there and we make a call to that, and then you take that key and you plug it into our verify endpoint, and this is kind of important to understand. Now, if before you do that, it's going to come back valid anyway. But if you go back to your response here, and yet you just put the entire like stringify the result. Yep, and then what you'll see here is we'll actually return the remaining for you. Now, this is another key piece to the puzzle, right? You want to know if you're using remaining or rate limiting or whatever you're using, right? You need to know for either yourselves for tracking purposes or for the end user. So if this was an AI product that we were building today, we'd want to tell the user, hey, by the way, you've only got 9 more generations before I'm going to cut you off.
Right.
Because they have to make that decision in their own mind, right? Like, okay, is Jason's next app worth paying another $10 for? Or did I get my fun with this $10 and now I'm out?
Right.
Or, you know, maybe you don't get paid till next week. So you kind of just say, okay, well, I'll wait till next week. I can come back and kind of do that. So we could make another route here called update, and we can actually update the key instead and say like, hey, like this person is paid. Let's give them a new, you know, new remaining or something like that. And you can actually copy the one from your create here because we're going to use the same, pretty much the same thing here. Except from create, there is an update here. And what this takes in is not an API ID. If you take that away, you should see that you need a key ID now. So that instead of the actual key, we need the key ID, which is different. And that's just our way of identifying, because that key, for people that may be concerned about security or whatever, we never store the key in our database. So like that's why we only show it to you once and then never see it again, because we don't actually ever store that stuff in our database. It's just a hash of the key. So we have a way to verify it's actually a key that we own, but there's no way for us to actually get the key right now. So yeah, you could put like metadata in here, and then if you call that endpoint,
we can just update to 10 uses again.
10, yep. And if you call that one now, you'll get a different result. First, you click update, and that should give you a result of nothing, which is what we expect. And then if you then go back to your verify, it should give you a different result. And there you go. So now you've got metadata attached to the user, and you're back to 9 remaining because you updated it to 10. So you obviously decremented one there when you used it. And so now you have this way of essentially using these keys how it works for your business, right? So if you change something, or a user pays more money or whatever it is, you get to essentially update the key. You don't have to issue them a new one. You don't have to, give them a new API key and say, like you've paid again, like here's a new API key. You just update the old one, which is essential if you're building out API products. You want to be able to maybe, a customer you've had for 10 years has suddenly gone from a business plus to like an enterprise user, and now they're on this big contract. You want to give them the keys to the entire API kingdom. You can now update their key and say like, okay, your new key, now you can do 1 million requests a minute. We're good for that. Like we've provisioned you. You're good. Thank you so much for this contract. And there's no like if, ands, or buts. It's just done.
Well, and I mean, this is like you've covered usage-based payment. Yeah. You're covering rate limiting, as like the free tier can handle 10 requests per second. But if you want, if you need more than that, then you got to pay, and we'll up it to whatever. And if you're enterprise, we'll up it even further. You're covering like it covers most of the ways that I've seen people monetize an API, and it does it just for me. And all I have to do is make sure that their payment went through before running this update call.
Yep. And similarly, right? Like maybe you need maybe your version of an API is a free trial, right? 7-day free trial, unlimited usage. We cover that too. We have an expiration. You just have to give it to us in Unix timestamp. I think it's milliseconds.
What is it? It would be new date. Or wait, no, date.
You're gonna ask me something I haven't used in a while.
Is it, and then you would have to add. Let's see. Is it milliseconds? So 1,000 milliseconds times 60 seconds.
Andreas has put it in the chat for us because we're not smart enough.
Oh, all right. Thank you for doing the math for me, because this would have taken us the rest of the show.
Yeah, we didn't hear like, and then you do this, and then you times it by 1,000, and then we get to the end. Okay, yeah.
All right, so
now
1,000 times 60 seconds times 60 minutes times 24 hours times 7. That's a week.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yep. So
okay.
gives you a week expiration, right? So now if you save that and you run the update again, and then you go back to your verify, you'll see that did we save that?
Did I save this? I did save it, I thought.
Let's just run that one more time. It should have given you an expiration. Verification is not returned. In verification it's not returned. Oh, that's possible. Some of the stuff we don't return.
Oh, so like I'll find it in here.
Yeah, you should be able to find it in here if you go to your keys, but the key will kill it. Yeah. So if you go to whichever key this was, there you go, expires in 7 days. It already has it in the details right here. Yep. So if you look at the details there, he's creating a linear ticket. Look at him. Best co-founder you could ever have is creating linear tickets to make sure we remember to do things. But you can see now, right? Like it expires in 7 days, last usage, total usage, remaining, like everything is here ready for you to like consume and do things with and make decisions, and we make it as easy as possible to do this. Now, of course, one of the worst things you can ever do, right, is your end user doesn't know anything about security and then decides to accidentally expose a key to the world, and now you're worried about API keys, right? Like, oh, you've exposed this one, now you're going to abuse my API. We also offer a way to revoke them. So, like, maybe they don't pay you, maybe they accidentally leak it, so let's create another route. We'll call it revoke. And you have a way to revoke them. So we're basically taking care of all of these different things that you would truly concerned about.
And it was going to let me do that, and it won't let me do that. So revoke route.ts, and then I'm assuming I can kind of copy this again.
Yeah. Just copy that one,
revoke,
drop it in there, and then the keys dot revoke, and then you don't need any of the extra stuff, just the key ID, and we'll immediately revoke that key from usage, and then the user can no longer use it.
So there are several ways that I would want to revoke an API key, right? And so this one, does this delete the key, or does it mark it as inactive?
It will remove the key entirely.
Okay.
So this would be like a very permanent state of like, I don't want them to do this.
Yeah.
If you wanted to do more of like I'm going to stop you from using it, the easiest way, right? So we are going to do a soft delete. It's coming next month. But right now, if you wanted to do it today, you could just set the update to remaining, turn that on and set it to 0.
Right, because then the key is alive, but it won't work.
Yep. And then, when they pay you again or whatever, whatever happens, you can just say, okay, either remove that by sending a null down, or set it to 1 million or whatever the number.
And does that work with the expiration date too? Because my other thought is, if I put somebody on a free trial and they like the service but they miss their expiration date, and then they come in a couple days later and they pay.
Yeah. So if we're using expiration remaining or like rate limiting, for example, that key is still active. It's just expired. So you can then just say, oh, they've paid me now because they missed their free trial. Update the key. Boom. Okay, they have access for another 30 days or whatever it might be.
And if I want to update this to, like, there is no expiration date, do I just set it to false?
You set it to null.
Null. Got it. Okay.
With complete confidence.
I thought you sounded very confident.
Yeah, I was confident. Yeah. What's good about this is I have a co-founder to correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, if you set null down, we'll turn it off.
Got it.
And yeah, so like what we're trying to do here is just make it easy for you to say, I want to build an API, whether it's a product you already have, right? So we have customers that had a product already, and they were like, I need an API. Because like that's the next step forward, right? Whatever it might be, whether you're white labeling your product or maybe you just have an API that you need to allow people to do whatever they want. We want people to be able to do that as fast as possible and also get all the security features they need today. And then if it's something we don't have, they can ask us and we'll build it for you. Like we have IP whitelisting for enterprise customers. So like If they only want their keys to run on one IP, we can do that today. No problem. We'll whitelist that IP. Boom. Okay, we have that feature. And essentially, what our idea here is that this is just the beginning. So API key auth is something that scales, but it only scales so far, right? If you think about, like, if I'm, I don't know, Amazon, I'm not going to issue a key to every customer, right? I'm going to have to do something else. So the next thing that we want to do is unlock gateways for people. So in the similar space to like Kong, Tyke, etc., we want to make this DX experience where it's just like, okay, if I want a gateway, I want to make it quick, fast, and easy, and I want to be able to globally distribute them or whatever. Like, we want to be able to unlock that for you too. So future company stuff, just for anybody that's interesting, that's what we're going to build out next, is this. So you don't have to be a DevOps guy or, you know, a middleware guy from before, or a backend dev who mostly deal with API gateways, right? They mostly deal with that stuff. If you've never done it before, similar to auth or API auth, we want you to be able to click a couple of buttons in the dashboard and, okay, we've set you up for a gateway. Here's how to use it. And now you can start, you know, funneling stuff through it, and we'll take care of all sorts of data for you. We'll give you more analytics about what paths and routes and where it's coming from, where we're processing the data, where it's going to. All that stuff will come with it. And you'll still be able to use our API key auth alongside it, but it gives you more things that you can do. And that's kind of where we're going to go in the future. Probably, you know, next year, that'll be when that really kind of kicks off. And then the next thing before that is permissions, like we talked about, where maybe you want to do like a Zanzibar model that says, like, yeah, they can, you know, create, read, update all these things, but they can't access this resource at this time. All those things we kind of take care of for you. And that's our next project. That's going to start in November. We're almost there. If you've never done Zanzibar Google Model Auth, it's quite the... Auth0 actually has like a nice academy thing about it. But like essentially the idea here is it's like a complex model that allows you to scale to some crazy thing without having to do essentially making a database full of like read, write, update. Like, it's very simple. It's not just RBAC or, you know, like access based. It's like a mix of all of that together in one spot.
That is definitely something that I have I know, like, RBAC was role-based access control, right? And I get it. I understand that's how GitHub works, right? And so, like, I know the words, but it just starts to melt my brain when I actually start building it into things. I'm always on the using side of this sort of auth, never on the building side. And so I like the idea of not having to think through it. I like the idea of knowing that this worked for somebody way bigger than me. And then if I just do it like this, it will scale if I do get lucky and this company blows up to massive proportions.
Exactly. And our idea here again is that, like, Zanzibar model is very complex. It's like ownership and relationships and all sorts of things come along with it. What we want you to be able to do is basically say, hey, this key can do click, click. Okay, I'm done. And you don't have to worry about what's happening behind the scenes. It's just like, yeah, they can read and write to this, or they can, you know, read, write, and update, rewrite, create, whatever it might be as part of your model. And you don't have to worry about anything else. It just happens. And Unkey just goes, cool, we know what you've clicked behind the scenes, and you never have to think about it again. Because that's the problem, is that when you start to build out these relationships in permissioning, it's so complex. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more complex as your company scales. And what we want you to be able to do is either hit an API and say, like, this person can do these things, or this person can't do these things, and you never have to think about what's happening behind the scenes. Just assume that if you've said this, this, and this, Unkey will take care of it for you.
Right.
Cool. And that's basically what we're doing. We're trying to be, I guess, the easiest way is like clerk of APIs. Is like a nice way that, you know, really good DX, really simple to use, and you never really have to think about it. You just toss it in there. We support a variety of languages, whether it's TypeScript, Python, Elixir, Go. We just did some cool stuff with the Redwood guys. Like we have a lot of stuff coming up. And yeah, that's us. I think, think that covers pretty much Unkey in a nutshell.
I mean, I think it's very cool that we were able to do kind of the boilerplate of what I would do for managing an API, like managing access to the API. All of these pieces are under 15 lines of code, I guess 16 in this case. And we are able to basically manage everything I could imagine needing to test out an idea, including making it, rate limited. Like you said, especially with some of these ideas around AI and stuff where it costs money to run the request. You need somebody to basically buy tokens to use that. And this, I'm already thinking of things that I could build that I wouldn't have attempted without knowing that this was here. Because, like I've got a bunch of ideas that I think somebody would be willing to pay $5 or $10 for. I don't think enough people are willing to pay $5 or $10 for it to be worth me building out an entire authentication system, though.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? And that's always the same thing, right? It's like I think someone may pay us $5 to do this, but I have to go and put in 5 or 10 hours a day for the next 5 weeks to even make $5.
Yes.
And if it's a passion project, maybe it's worth it, right, to you. Or it's a learning project, it's definitely worth it. But if you've got, both of us are very much idea guys where, loads of ideas are always floating around in our heads. It's why we do YouTube. It's why we do Twitch. It's why we do these kinds of things. You can't afford to do 5 weeks on everything. So
exactly.
If you can reduce the amount of time that it takes to get from A to B, let's say if you had an idea today that was like, I want to do generative AI icons. I don't know, that's a thing. You could do that and have it as an API service or have an API that does those things. And instead of taking 5 weeks, it now takes 3 days because you've done, 50 lines of code here, maybe.
Right.
And now you've got an entire fleshed out API authentication platform. Now all you have to worry about is Stripe, which, they make it fairly easy to do Stripe. Maybe you need front end auth for someone to sign up. Okay, so you use Clerk or Auth, Zero or whoever. Okay, that's another piece off my list. And all I now have to worry about is actually producing the icons that someone can download. Done.
Yeah, I think it points to maybe a shift in our industry where the real leverage for devs these days is less in knowing things top to bottom and more in being an API wrangler, because just about everything is being offered these days as a service. And if you can stitch those APIs together, you can build anything.
Yeah.
And that's a really powerful place to be as a web dev. And I think it just feels, I don't know, it gives me a lot of hope. It makes me excited about what's possible out there. And even for somebody like me, the older I get, the less interested I am in no project is interesting enough for me to give up all my nights and weekends on it.
Exactly right.
But I would love to take I don't know, maybe a Saturday next month and spin up an idea and see if anybody thinks it's worth paying for. That is really fun, right? That to me is worth doing. So it also, I think it helps with not just the people who are willing to burn the midnight oil to chase an idea, but with people who otherwise wouldn't have access to the extra time required. It's such a leveler. And I love it so much, and I'm very excited to see what this unlocks for people. And again, I feel like we could talk all day because I want to keep going. But we're almost out of time, so I'm going to move us now to, if somebody wants to go further with this, where do you recommend they go? What are the right places to head next?
Yeah, so if you want to check out Unkey in general, first thing I would do is maybe check out unkey.dev/templates. There's some jumping off points there with a bunch of different things. I was like, oh no, it's down for a second.
Nope, that's me. I'm down.
Yeah, so we got some examples in here, and we also got some of our product users, like openstatus.dev, for example. They show you how you integrate into like a full-blown product, or just like a NextJS template, just the things to get you started. Outside of that, join our Discord. We have a Discord that you can find at unkey.dev. If you hit the drop-down menu there, it shows up, I believe, as Discord.
Here it is.
You can join that. You can come chat with us. You can talk about your ideas. We can help you decide how that works. And then, just follow us on Twitter and keep up with what we're doing. Follow me on Twitter. Follow Unkey on Twitter. Follow Andreas on Twitter. Any of those things will allow you to keep up to date with us. We got some really cool stuff happening. I think if you go to our 9 followers, I'm pretty sure one of them is probably him. There he is. He's the first one at the bottom. There we go. That is Andreas. And we're doing a lot of stuff. We'd love to, if you're into open source and you've never done contributions before, we've got plenty of things to work on. Lots of example stuff that we think would be cool. You can help us with docs. You can help us with code if you find bugs. We're always willing to help guys out. And I know it's Hacktoberfest. We're not really doing anything this year per se, but if you come talk to us and say like, hey, I found this bug and I want to fix it, but I also need it for my contributions, we'll slap a tag on it for you, not a problem. But overall, come check us out. We're always around doing something.
Well, I am very excited for what the future holds for Unkey. I feel like this is something that hearing what it's capable of makes me reconsider what I'm capable of. And I like it when a tool makes me feel that way. Makes me want to go build a bunch of ideas that are in my icebox right now that I was like, I don't have time for that. And with that, I'm gonna take us home. So this episode, like every episode, has been live captioned. We've had Lee here from White Coat Captioning. Thank you so much, Lee, for being here. And that is made possible through the support of our sponsors, Netlify and Vetsu Code, both kicking in to make the show more accessible to more people, which I very much appreciate. While you're checking out things on the Learn with Jason site, make sure you go and look at our schedule because we've got just an absolutely killer schedule. We're going to have 3D in React with a visual editor, which is not a sentence that I thought would ever make sense, but it does. Nope. We're going to learn how it works. We're going to do Svelte 5. We're going to get into runes with Rich Harris. I'm really excited about that one. Awesome. We're going to write some emails using JSX, which I hate dealing with email, but I write a lot of email, so I'm very excited to hopefully be able to do it in a workflow that I enjoy. So looking forward to that. And lots more that I haven't had a chance to put up on the site yet. If you've got something that you want to see, always let me know. Make sure you click any one of these icons so that you know what's going on with the show and are aware of things that are happening. James, any parting words for everybody before we call this one done?
Yeah, just go build something. Go have fun. Go enjoy yourself.
I got nothing to add to that. What a great way to end it. Thank you all so much. We're going to go find somebody to raid, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.